Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Randall Richmond, and I'm the Director of Athletics here at Kent State University and a proud graduate of the NCAA Charles Wickham Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute helped me refine who I was as a man well before focusing on who I was as an administrator. Within the program, I developed lifelong friendships, colleagues, and confidants to help me discover my true purpose in this profession, which is to be a transformational leader that has a positive impact on people's lives well beyond sports. And as the great orator Big Sean often says, the energy you give is what you manifest. Peace.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. We are joined by Sean Frazier. Sean is the Vice President and Director of Athletics at Northern Illinois University. Greetings, Sean. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, brother. Appreciate it.
We also have Lauren Bullock. Lauren is Assistant Professor at Temple University. And Lauren, you also do some work with Stretch. You are co-founder and chief operating officer. Tell us a little bit about what Stretch is.
Yes, Stretch. We work with sports professionals on coaching in terms of communication, executive presence, and leadership development. We work with both professional and college coaches and administrators to ensure that they're able to communicate their values, their philosophy in different spaces as they're connecting and building relationships.
Which is excellent. I wanted to have you on, Frazier, like we usually talk. Whatever's pending, let's just have a conversation about it wherever the conversation goes. There's a couple big things in the world that specifically coaches in general are worried about. And I think if coaches are worried about it, ADs are worried about it. NIL and transfer portal are two things that are top of mind when you talk about coaches. And in my thought process, where I talk about leadership and organizational development, you think about culture. You being a former coach, you being around athletics for as long as you have, I wonder about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me. It's interesting because that piece of it is so much important to the overall outcomes, right? So the first part of that is that understanding that, this onboarding is could be a short period of time. And then the other piece of it is that your culture has been built up over time. All right. So to fast track something that's been done over time, that's tough. Right. That's a tough situation. So I think for the first thing it is that, especially with the the portal, on the portal side, is that, you're always constantly re-recruiting now, both staff and students. So you can't just, okay, we've installed it this week. Y'all should know it by now. It's an ongoing process. So it takes everyone, all the senior managers, all the direct reports, all the incoming or newbies to your organization. You're constantly re-emphasizing that this is a re-recruit or a understanding of the things and core values that are important to our organization. So it's a lot, right? So for the coaches, it's, you got to re-recruit your kids. Well, the seniors? Yeah. Because if you don't, now you're people looking out the window, they're being enticed, they're being, talked to by both family and other entities that might want them as a part of their organization. So I think that part of it is a critical component.
And they bring that institutional value that, you get it from some staff members, but those seniors are the ones who have seen everybody come through. They've heard all the speeches, the phrases every year that they choose, and they're the ones that will become your choir. Like they'll preach for you when you're not in those spaces. Like, I like him. He's a good person. Like, let's go with them. Yep. When, as you're trying to share all that information, I think people miss that part in the culture. They overlook it.
There's also this aspect of, it's not just a coach dealing with players coming and going. There's parts of the administrative staff that have to make sure the player that's coming is on board, is in track with whatever they need to be in track with. There's compliance aspects. Yep. There's a number of aspects. So the entire organization has picked up responsibilities basically when it's thing. Talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it's It has. I'm almost speechless based on everything we're talking about. Yeah. So from the new, we've got the new guidelines for the transformational committee, hot off the press, January 3rd. But we've been living it through the process of development. Taking a look at the new mental health standards, the new standards in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. All the different components around scholarship athletes. There's so much. And we're already taxed and we've been kind of exposed as an organization, especially in higher ed, and I would even say other organizations, because COVID really tested us. COVID made us think about and go through a process of discovery about where we're the most vulnerable. And I think ultimately the staff folks have been overworked, over maxed out, mental health issues associated with that. And then, those extroverts like myself who are used to, being out in the public and now reduced to being on Zooms and Teams and all these other things, that's played a significant part on interactions and mental health. So yeah, we're tired.
So I love that you shared the interactions piece. So in our coaching, a lot of what we've been talking about is giving people a space to dump and to process some of that in a way that's safe. So in our company, we understand sports and how it works and what the business nuance is, what the culture is, and just giving folks to kind of that opportunity to dump and then figure out what's next. Do I stay? Do I go? Has been super helpful in preventing burnout, which is a lot of why we're trying to get some outreach, as well as the Zoom part. It takes a different skill set to communicate on Zoom. And I don't think people realize that. And that adjustment has been incredibly hard, but it's doable. I think about if you saw your favorite Instagram or TikTok or Facebook person, or even if you watched a movie and you saw your favorite person walking down the street, you'd be like, hey, I know you. I watched your videos, right? You wouldn't hesitate to. You feel like you have a connection, but most folks don't think about it because we weren't forced to think about it in the ways that we were in COVID.
Yeah, 100%. You got to do it. I wonder about with Stretch, if let's say NIU were to engage Stretch for services with their coaches. Talk to us a little bit about how Stretch would talk to the coaches in terms of coaching them up, whether it be one-on-one or as a staff or something in this culture and the communicating value for incoming kids through the portal.
Yeah, so the work we do is first getting to know people, meaning there's no template like check this box, check that box. It's really about hearing people and listening. So we'll do some background research, but we'll sit there and we'll talk and engage about what your goals are, what your intentions are, what are you struggling with. Oftentimes we know when we have that experience, but we want to see how things are surfaced in your space. And then if we were going to continue, it's coaching sessions on Zoom. We meet regularly in a quiet place so that you can focus, and we then tailor the program based on that individual person so that in the end they come out better for the staff as well as better for themselves. We all know that if you're not in that space where your mental health is at its best, you're not going to be able to engage and retain the students. We also know that students are changing. Today we're going to be talking about with our participants what this new generation of student athlete looks like. And so some of it is just even understanding that, which it's forcing us to speed up and change how we interact. And so I think college in general is just going through a big overhaul. And those that are staying with that and competing are going to be able to stay. There are going to be a lot of folks that are left behind because they're not changing at a quick enough pace.
Yeah. In my experience with coaches and think about what you talked about with culture. Mm-hmm. A lot of coaches, unless they're the head coach or even sometimes as a head coach, they don't necessarily know how to articulate their values, don't know how to articulate how their values tie into the culture, how their values tie into their organizational leadership philosophy. So when it comes down time for them to be thrust into leadership, if for whatever reason, or to talk to someone, whether it be in an interview or talk to the press or address people that aren't the players, right? They find trouble in doing it. But I think in terms of what you're talking about with Stretch, the communication of those things tie into culture, tie into value, especially when culture being a long term, and now you got to onboard somebody in the short term, right? Mm-hmm. Which is excellent. The portal. Now, Frazier, you're an idea guy, right? You always have these ideas. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they're just ideas, but if they're not coming, we won't have any ideas. So what I know about you is you probably have some thoughts on the phenomenon that is the transform portal at the current moment. Tell us a little bit about your idea on how things can change in the transfer portal.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've had this conversation with the NCAA on data sets, taking a look at folks that are in the portal and what populations and and what is happening to those individuals that don't go to another institution and they're on full scholarship. So the real concept that we've been as a leadership team taking a look at, and working with Lead One and Tom McMillan and Moa, Stan Johnson. It's really more about making sure that the degree completion happens. So the scholarship ends. You're not happy about what's going on, at your spot. You're looking around. You put your name in the portal. At that point, that signals that the current coach at the host institution, needs to fill that hole, whatever that is, scholarship, what have you. So most institutions, you go in, a scholarship's not being held for you. You're going into a situation where you might already have a place that you want to go. But at the end of the day, you go in and then you're kind of in this void until you hook on to another institution with another scholarship. Well, what happens to those individuals that don't have an option? They go into the portal, they have a full scholarship. The outcome is that now you don't, 1 week becomes 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You look back in the rear view mirror, you don't have a scholarship any longer. It's done. Now what do you do? Now, that's an unfortunate situation. If you talk about a population, the ability to be able to even garner higher education is through some type of means of scholarship. In this case, it's athletic. So now what happens? Now you don't have scholarship. You have to go to work. You can't go to work. Maybe you have a financial situation where you can't do that. My concept would be, what if there was a entity out there, CFP, NCAA, some individual or organization that says, if you petition for tuition, but the stipulations that I would attach to it is that individual can come back to that host institution, could not participate in that particular sport or any type of athletic activities, but will be able to get their education with the tuition scholarship for the missing part that they might have. So if you're a freshman, you can petition for the rest of those time. If you're a junior, you come back for those 2 years. But the end game is graduation. At least that individual now has a chance to get higher education, regardless of the athletic ability that they have. Instead of going into the situation, I don't have those data points here, but I do have data that suggests that we have a lot of people that go into the black hole or the portal, come out, no financial situation, and now they're done with higher education, and now they're trying to struggle for the next journey of their life. So why not have a scenario where we have a catch-all? But also, too, I do realize there might be some unscrupulous situation that would force individuals into the portal to be able to get this particular tuition. Yeah. The stipulation of no athletic activity or no football really puts it on the student to say that, hey, I need to graduate. At least I have this opportunity for tuition at the very least to be able to get my education.
I find that to be an interesting idea. See if I can sum it up.
Please.
Right? I go into the portal. If I haven't already been recruited, right, tampered with as a student,
whatever
athlete,
it is,
right. But I go into the portal thinking I can find a better situation somewhere else. Me and the coach don't get along, whatever it is, and I get to playing time. And an option doesn't happen for me. There's no school coming to get me. There's no scholarship, but I did have a scholarship, and nothing happens for me. I have the opportunity to go back to the school that I just left.
The host institution, yes.
Institution. Yeah. But I wouldn't be able to participate in athletics anymore, but I would get the rest of my school paid for it.
Yeah, you would go through some type of application process like any other scholarship. You would go through a process of saying, listen, and it's only for you. So in other words, in the case point of the FBS student athletes, and taking a look at, the majority of FBS student athletes we're seeing, especially at the football level, right, are people of color. So I'm looking at a population right now on the yield on that. We're going to have large numbers over a data set after we go through a 5-year period of this portal, that it could be really dramatic. We have young people that now cannot get higher education or put themselves in a situation based on the decision that they might have been, coerced to do or others. So I think this is an opportunity at least to deal with the graduation piece of it, because at the end of the day, that's why you come to an institution of higher learning. It's the principal reason is to graduate with a degree.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think about the nuance of, if I'm a freshman, right, contemplating going in, am I going to lose the 4 years of eligibility? Maybe there's special circumstances. I guess there's always special.
But you know what? You don't have to do it. I'm saying that, if you're a junior, if you're a sophomore, The reason why you went there is to play ball, but at the end of the day, the principal reason why is to graduate. So here's the father in me with the 3 kids that I have, and the former football player and the former coach. I'm saying at the end of the day, this is a snapshot in time. The majority of your life, you're going to be using that education. That travels with you, okay? This is a way at least to deal with the critics that might be out there saying, hey, this portal thing is horrible. Or others are saying, what is the FBS, or what is the CFP, or where all this wealth that we see, how's it getting back to those particular kids that are playing? And I think that's the fundamental thing that we need to pay attention to. Graduation is the key. It's the ticket. It's the ability to better yourself. So this is one of probably many ways. This is my big idea, and I'll probably get criticized for it. But I do think there's enough people out there well-intentioned that this could be a possibility for those who really want to graduate.
And then I guess funding that goes into the industry of college athletics, right?
Last time I checked, the money looks good.
Right. You figure out the entity that is there to support. Right.
Well, you
which
bring
makes
up
a lot of sense.
Such a good point. And I guess bringing it back to culture, there was something about the school itself that student athlete wanted, right? And it keeps them engaged in that community. I also think about, I have a student athlete who I love dearly who transferred in and is trying to graduate. And there's so many more resources available to him now that he's not playing on the field that he has access to, for sure. And so it sounds like a good idea on paper. So,
well, and I was talking to my wife, my beautiful wife, Rosa Frazier. God bless. I put a call out to her. We were talking about this concept. She's a former law professor. We talked about the issues around this, and quite frankly, if you really want to do right, and you're really talking about wanting to come here for an education, and this is not the NFL, this is not some other piece. I know we got paid for play now, and some of the other things going on. This is at least an opportunity to get back to the holistic approach to higher education and giving this young person a chance to get their degree.
Yeah, that's interesting.
NCAA has an image repair issue, and this will go a long way with repairing that.
I have no comment on that. Professor,
I'm on teaching side. I know I'm on the teaching side. I can say that. But it makes people really show their values, right? And I think we live in a space. I know current student athletes, they have high expectations of leadership, and it really puts people on their toes to say, what are you actually doing? And a program like this would have a lot of credibility.
Yeah, that's excellent.
It also forces student athletes to really think twice before they get into that portal. And the people that are in their ear, they got to come up with a good reason to forego that athletic scholarship and support the graduation.
Now, it's not been thought out all the way, and you're totally right about that. But I would tell you that, there would be an application process. There would be a process of vetting. There would be whatever entity took this on, and hint, if CFP or others would want to do this. But there would be a way, at least, that you can manage it and go through a process. Those who are serious, and you know what the end game is? You're probably going to be saving the lives or making such a major impact on some of these young people who are just well-intentioned and who just made bad decisions. You remember when you're 18 to 23. I remember that a long time ago.
I'm still 25.
God bless you. Hey, and I'm not knocking it. I've been trained well by the best. But I will say that you don't make the best decisions, and you have a lot of different influences. This gives you an opportunity to at least engage the principal reason why you come to, college, which is to get your degree and graduate.
Yeah, which is excellent. Yeah, all the entities, right? The governor of Massachusetts, who is now about to become the president. I mean, it's a lot of people to talk to, but it's an excellent idea to get out there, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. Ask you about NIL, right? I look at, you hear some of the numbers that some of these kids are getting offered to come to play at a school. I'm like, are you offering all 85 of these kids that much money? Because is it that big of a pool of money? But I wonder what your thoughts on that, because, recently in the last probably month or so, we've seen the ADs having to step up and say, support our collective because it supports our student athletes. So now it's a fully embraced organizational concept that is a part of college athletics. So talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on this NIL thing.
Well, obviously, I have a collective.
I guess your thoughts can really be one-sided, right?
Boneyard collective. Let's put it out there. I don't want to be someone that's sitting here, living in a glass house. But for me, as being a former student athlete, I believe in the branding of this. Your personal brand. Should you monetize your personal brand? I totally support that. Okay, just looking at the 1 or 2% that can do that, and we're seeing large numbers of individuals who are being very entrepreneurial on what they're doing. So we have open doors. Right? We have all these different things that we can do, and then we have our Boneyard Collective. The bottom line is this going to enhance the experience and give education to our young people? So again, the snapshot in time I'm talking about, this 4 or 5 years, and then in life, is this going to help them in life? I see this as a great educational opportunity. So I'm supportive of that. I am concerned about the interference. Okay, the mudding of the waters, the phone call in the middle of the night saying, hey, if you go into the portal, you might be able to get X. Those things are unscrupulous. It's out there. It's the wild, wild west. We have to get a control of it. But I like the concept that a young person can monetize their brand.
Here's the question I have, though, specifically about it is there's a somewhere in the universe, there is a theoretical line where ADs weren't talking about the collective. And then that line happened in the timeline of the universe. And now ADs are saying, hey, support our collective.
Do you want me to tell you why?
I know why, but I'm wondering about your thoughts on that, on why hands off at first.
I think that it was so new and it was so taboo. I'm a seasoned vet, right? I'm going into 10 years at NIU, and this is not what we did. It's pay for play model. It's not the
what we
former amateur model that we all engage. But a lot of things we haven't done in the past, and now we're making changes. This one's different because it's clear that it has such a recruiting component to it. It has such a larger than life component that affects your ability to be competitive on the field, on the court, or what have you. So I think that now people are figuring, hey, you know what, this is it. We got to get with it, and we have to do it the right way. I still have a certain chill behind my back of my neck when you get an outside entity doing things. But I'll give a shout out to Jason Belzer. We've used him and with the Boneyard Collective and putting it together and actually having a framework that deals with community support and volunteerism. You're doing things for the money that you are earning. Yeah. This is not just turn the sprinkler on, the lights out before you leave, and then there's $100,000 in your sock. This is a process. And I think that ultimately, once you put it like that, it's more of a doable, understanding, educational experience than just filling up money in a box and then it appearing on your desk.
You can see where it enhances the student athlete experience, right? Which is the buzz term for athletic directors.
It is. I don't use that buzz term, but I've heard that.
Right, exactly.
It also provides additional educational opportunities, right? You want them to go and learn how to manage their money, and you want them to go be able to do that stuff. And so it gives you a little bit of money that you can help them try and figure out now if you have those trusting relationships and a culture where your philosophies and morals match your values, right?
Right on. You all over it. See, the professor's legit.
Yeah. Anytime you get somebody academic to back up the theories.
I like her. Yeah.
Well, Sean, this has been an excellent conversation. I always enjoy when you join us here on the One Question Leadership podcast, or even over at Athletic Director. There's always a good conversation for us. Thank you for joining us.
You know what? Only for you, my friend. Only for you. God bless you.
Lauren, also appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. That was Sean Frazier. Sean is the Vice President and Director of Athletics at NIU, and we were joined by Lauren Bullock. Lauren is an Assistant Professor at Temple and also Co-Founder and Chief Operating Officer with Stretch. And of course, I am Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.